Sunny 16 presents.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Lighting Lounge. This will be episode number 6. My name is John Michael, and joining me this evening for me and mid-afternoon for you, is Jamie Maldonado. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you can be here. On our last show, we were saying that Aid is off gallivanting around Canada actually at the moment. He's taking a well-deserved vacation, and we actually were thinking that, well, we weren't going to record for a while, but I sent him a message and I said, hey, we've been wanting to get some guests on anyways. What do you think if I do it without you? So Aid will maybe listen to this, and you were actually one of the first people that I thought about when we were thinking about doing the show. Partly because I've watched a bunch of your videos. So
awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, really lovely to have you on here. For people who might not be aware of you and your work and what you do, why don't you give us the 30-second Jamie Maldonado story?
I am a primarily portrait photographer, primarily on film these days, from East Texas. That's the part that's east of Dallas, with a bunch of trees. And I have been doing YouTube videos for a few years. I had worked in education and stuff like that, but I'm just full-time photography and starting a community darkroom. So we did fundraising for that. That's complete. And now we're trying to pin down a location.
Cool. Yeah, I saw on your social media and stuff that you were working on that project, and you seem to have gotten a lot of publicity. I saw some clips of you on the news and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How's that whole experience been for you?
It's been a lot of fun. I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to go, but I sent out a bunch of press releases to all these local organizations and new organizations and stuff. Didn't hear anything for like 2 or 3 weeks, and the fundraiser was going. And then finally, everyone started writing back. And that was fun. I did local TV, local newspapers, a bunch of local stuff, a couple of national things. There was, I think, 35 MMC, and some things like that. So that was fun. Negative, positives. Let me talk about it. And they just mentioned it again this week, so that was fun.
Cool. How has the response been from, I don't know, newscasters or just normal people on the street, people who aren't kind of in this film photography bubble?
Oh yeah, there are a few people who are like, they still make that, but overall it's been really enthusiastic. There was a photography course at my hometown, Kilgore, which is about 20 minutes from where I live now. They had a photo program for a little over 40 years. They had it for longer than that, but under the same teacher for 40 years. Rufus Lovett, great photographer. I learned from him. He was my mentor, and I was kind of hoping I had my foot in the door for that job, and then the college cut the program a few years ago. And but people would take those courses all the time. There would be everyone from just somebody bored at home, people out of high school, all the way to like doctors and dentists who would take the same course over and over again to use the darkroom. And they've been all out because it had analog all the way until the end. They had a darkroom all the way till the end. And so there's like still these people who just a few years ago lost their darkroom access, and now they're excited because there's those people and then a whole new generation who are discovering it in the meantime. And so overall, it's been a really good reaction to it.
No, that's fantastic. I'm sure it'll be nice to kind of maintain that access for people. So maybe there's a gap, but it would be great if you could kind of fill that gap and keep it going for people there.
Oh yeah, and there's nowhere to even buy film unless you get lucky and find a few rolls at Walmart or Walgreens or something. So I'm excited. Outside of going to Dallas, which is basically a 2.5 hour drive from here.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So you said that you're primarily a portrait photographer, and when people think of portraits, often light and lighting is a key part of that. We call this the lighting lounge, but it's kind of been interesting. What what does lighting mean to you? What is, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I used to think as like artificial lighting and natural lighting as different things. But the more I learn about it, the more I realize that like there's natural lighting and there's ways to control natural lighting. And then artificial lighting is just ways of getting that or adding to it that just aren't there. Like it's nighttime, but I want it to look like sun in the window, like I'm working on cinema or something. And so the principle is the same. Like I want this to be a window lit scene. You're going to try to light it in a similar manner. So you're just trying to create the light by any means, whether it be the available light or with tools like strobes and stuff. So to me, it's just it's really any act of photography is all. I mean, it's like they say, like photography means literally to write with light.
So would you say that there are no photographs without lighting?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, the light is the only thing that converts the silver or triggers the electrons or whatever on sensors to create image data. So, yeah, I guess so. I think there is like literally no light without the photo part of photography.
When I started thinking about it, I thought, strobes in the studio, something like that is very obviously I am lighting the scene. But,
Oh, yeah.
a landscape photographer picking the time of day is also choosing what light to use for that picture.
Yeah, and don't tell me that they couldn't, if like a landscape photographer couldn't drag out giant lights in the middle of the night to the video scene. Because I saw a producer, I forget his name, but he's the Coen Brothers producer. He was talking about lighting No Country for Old Men. And he's the one who had to acquire all the lights for, there's this scene in a desert, this shootout at night. And he said they had these trucks with these giant cinema lights, like 6 foot tall lights. And they lit the entire thing with dozens of these. And so he was lighting landscape with artificial lighting.
Wow.
Or the cinematographer or the lighting director, or whoever is doing it. But he was the guy who had to go buy rent all of those lights,
and the power to go with them too. That must have been a logistical
exactly.
thing.
Oh yeah, you can imagine how hot those things get.
Oh, those are massive, massive lights.
Oh yeah.
I've been on some film sets at night actually, and when they switch those things on, it's like whoa. It's like daylight, and then you see the film later, and it's like, it still looks like evening. That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even scenes that are so dark in movies, which they're really good at doing these days, it feels like. They have so much lighting at play. I also remember I was in Austin years ago, and they were doing the X Games there.
Oh,
and
cool.
They had like the half pipe set up downtown or something, and they had this big crane with this huge, huge bank of lights on it just over it, like 50 feet in the air, 100 feet in the air, something like that. It's like, well, get a little sunlight, on a crane if you have the right budget.
Yeah. Yeah. So what, when I look at your photos and stuff, one of the things that kind of a trend I've seen or in your videos is you often like to shoot into the sun.
Yeah. That's even all the way back to college. They're like, people are like, oh, this is a Jamie shot. And so I just recently discovered the term for that. My French is terrible. It's like contre-jour, into the light.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, that's exactly what I do.
Okay.
And I guess I'm not really sure exactly what started that. I remember being a kid. And, you're a kid. This is before the internet. So your entertainment is TV and toys and whatever is in the world. And I'd be laying down, and we had a ceiling fan in my room, and had, I can't remember if it was a bare bulb in it or not, but I just remember looking at the light, and I was bored, and I hold my hand up, and it's like, oh, that looks pretty cool. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but it's like, wow, it's like dark, and then you get the rim light and everything. And it's like, that looks really cool. So now, like, I heard like, like, oh, put the sun over your shoulder and, get it, nice and, flat or whatever the proper normal lighting would be. And I'm like, but it looks cooler if I like just go all the way around. It's like, well, what if I just like block the sun out completely and then put a flash on the person's face so I can still see their face? Because I saw some magazine photos that did that, especially like that was, I think, a really big thing to like underexpose backgrounds and flash people to even them out. And I saw like you underexpose the background by like 1 or 2 stops, I think it is, and then you expose them properly, and you have this real dramatic. Often, like those were shot on like really saturated slide film at the time, so you would have these like just deeply saturated, deep blue skies, and this real warmly lit person. That probably made an impression on my teenage brain.
Gives you a nice contrast and really kind of makes the subject pop then with that.
Oh yeah,
that lighting just to bring them up and focus all the attention on them.
Oh yeah, very dramatic.
Cool. And so it was just kind of something you saw and were attracted to and started doing.
Yeah, pretty much. And it always looks unique, and I liked playing with the. Like if you get the sun coming out of like right behind or just out of someone's head or something, you get the rays coming out. And because a lot of times, especially before I could shoot like higher speeds with flash, you'd have to close down the aperture a lot. And so you'd start getting sun stars, and there would be things like that. So that would always be fun and just unique looking, and not what you see with your eyes every day, but maybe a very dramatic version of that. And I've always been I grew up, like I said, the BMX scene. There was a magazine called Freestyling, and it was run by this guy named Bob Osborne. He is currently an amazing landscape photographer in Montana, but he started kind of around the same time as like Grant Britton and stuff like that, the skate photographers. And he had a similar approach. He was a very good photographer. He would take these dramatic photos of people on ramps, and he would add strobe to it and things like that. And his daughter did that, and they taught this young kid named Spike Jones how to take photos. And now he's like an Oscar-winning director and stuff like that. But yeah, so I learned from that magazine, number one, about like dramatic, interesting lighting, but also they treated everyone like these were all just kids in these magazines, like kids jumping their bikes off of 10-foot tall pieces of plywood. and then it's like they make them sound like gods or titans or something. And that's always kind of my approach, like how do I make this scene or thing feel epic or bigger than life or surreal. And so I think that's part of my background too.
Trying to make things look larger than life. That's cool.
Yeah.
I can only imagine trying to get your light set up and the sun in the background and everything, and then you've got somebody on a skateboard, flying around and trying to find that right moment where they're looking their best and in the right pool of light and everything.
They would do that, especially like in the late 80s, like on Nikon F3s or I doubt they were on F4s. They were kind of small. So like you probably had like an F2 or F3 with a motor drive, and you were pre-focusing a fisheye lens and all this stuff and just hoping you got it right.
Yeah, that's cool. It's always, I grew up, my father was a photographer, and so I grew up around cameras and old film cameras and stuff, but just when I was a kid, so I wasn't paying that much attention to it. And then, when I was a teenager, digital was already out, so I kind of learned on digital and did that.
Yeah.
So when I see the effort that people went to get the shot, and the skill that was required and the patience and the, just the sheer number of pictures that were taken, the rolls of film that they were going through trying to get that one shot. It's impressive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I watched a lot of, I keep forgetting the guy's name. He died like kind of, he did Dennis, something like that. He did these lighting videos in the 80s, and they had kind of floated around around the internet, probably on YouTube too. I go blank on his name every time. Really great lighting guy. He died of cancer like 2005 or something, but he was like super high energy guy. And he did these videos I watched early on when I was learning how to do the strobe, like when Strobist hit and stuff. If you remember that, Strobist was great.
Yeah.
But they would do these commercial shoots, and they would be like previewing it on 8x10 Polaroid, and then having to like do these crazy like multiple flash additive things on a single sheet of film for slide photography. And yeah, it's just, and there was no digital, there was nothing added in computer. Everything was like on a slider with a light or a piece of board or painted backdrop or whatever. It was incredible.
It's cool. I mean, just the creative problem solving for that sort of thing is so cool.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and then waiting to see if it actually turned out the way you wanted it to or not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty cool.
I definitely learned on film, but I learned a lot faster on digital. I definitely I was kind of too poor to afford like tons of endless film and sending it off to labs to get developed. So I was like very slow motion. And then I got my hands on Nikon D1, and I couldn't stop shooting because I finally got a chance to just take photos and see what they did. So I like that about digital photography, because there's a point where it can accelerate your learning, but also then you get to where, and this will be something we probably get to in a minute too, but you get to a point where like, oh, I don't trust my lighting. I need to test it on digital before I shoot it on film. And it's just so exhausting. And then it's like, well, I just use a light meter now. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
It's a little more having to have faith in your numbers or whatever, but it's just a lot easier to get into a flow, not having to juggle the two cameras. And yeah.
That's cool. So you mentioned when you were starting and when you were learning Flash, how did you go about doing that? What was kind of your process of getting into using Flash?
I had had encounters with it briefly here and there, and I had wanted to do some basic off-camera stuff, and I kind of like stopped taking photo classes before I got to that studio stuff, really. So it really hit a high gear when the Strobist website thing, the Strobist blog, really took off. I probably found that a year or so after it started, and I got super into that, and it was very accessible. He did everything to, like, I already had a flash. I just had to buy the little brackets and a light stand and an umbrella or something, and I could start using it off camera. And I had a pretty good a pretty good flash to use off camera too. So it was just fun for that he would post an assignment or a tutorial. I'm like, I can go out and try that. And even if it didn't work out, I could learn something. And I would just start practicing it on people a little bit at a time. And I think just before that, probably just before I found that website, I had started using Fill Flash on camera. But I was already bouncing it because I realized like direct is a little too flat, too harsh. But if I point it up or point it at a wall, I get a more pleasing image. I just didn't completely understand why. And that website taught me a lot of the why. And that really is what just got the ball rolling. And with digital too, there was no, because I grew up with oh no, what if I waste a roll of film here? And now I'm like, well, I've got like 1,000 photos. I'll just, I might waste an hour, but at least I'll learn something and not be broke at the end of that.
Yeah, and you've got the instant learning effect when you're looking. You take a picture and you go, okay, what does that look like? Change it. What does that do? And then you can
why is my background like that? Why are there black bars on the photo when I go too fast? And just things like that you can discover right away, because you get a roll of film, you kind of have to do an autopsy on it.
Yeah, and you have to,
why did
really
this happen?
Pay attention and take good notes and that sort of thing. And I'm horrible at that, so I'm really happy that I was able to learn on digital, because it's like when I first started shooting film, I would write down every roll, which which f-stop and shutter speed I used on which camera, on which shot for which role, and very
I
quickly.
got an 8x10. I was like, and I got like a little one of those memo books. Like, this is going to be every shot. No, no, not for me.
Well, as long as you know what you need to develop it at, then that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if I shoot something at a weird speed or do something with it, I'll like stick a piece of tape on it, or I'll write on the canister, depending on what type of film it is, and then I'll make that note. But that's the best I can do.
Well, and I mean, you get good results, so
Thank you.
yeah.
I guess it works for me.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to find out what works for them, and
Absolutely.
as you say, juggling cameras and pins and notebooks and all kinds of stuff is you gotta draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, some people, I think, probably that's another thing I think people should know about using Flash, just like photography and a bunch of other things. There's no like right or wrong way. Like, you can get, if you can get the same result 2 or 3 different ways, none of them are wrong.
Yeah, sure. So what was then the process of, you had your Flash, you were doing the strobist assignments, and I guess at some point you probably, I know now you use bigger strobes. Maybe you upgraded at some point, or did multiple flashes, or what was kind of the journey of doing that stuff?
It really helped me that I did enroll in one of those classes or some of those classes at Kilgore College to learn the studio stuff, like, because Rufus Levitt, the instructor there, really great all-around photographer. His father was a campus photographer at a university in Alabama for several years, so he grew up around it. So he just has a very broad understanding of photography, and it was very helpful to know everything from like classic portrait studio stuff all the way to experimental work and everything in between. And so I took some portrait photography classes, and it makes you have to learn like what are like loop shadows and I'm going blank on
you got Rembrandt light and
Rembrandt. Thank you.
Paramount light.
Rembrandt, loop, short, long, or short, broad lighting, rim lighting, backlighting, stuff like that. You learn all the different shadows, and then because I tell people, it's like at first when you're looking through the viewfinder and you see, like, let's say you're in a studio with modeling lights on the strobes, and you see it, it's just total chaos. And like you don't discern anything. I tell people, it's like, just start with the nose shadow. The nose shadow will tell you so much. And that's one of the things, like, I wish people, I think people should learn with a continuous light or some kind of continuous light or a modeling light, because then you can see by moving it around the shadow. I tell people, it's like the shadows on the nose are kind of like a compass. And I tell you a lot. It's like if you can make that shadow do what you want, a lot of the other lighting is going to follow. Like every other thing's going to look close to right, and you just start recognizing a little bit more at a time. And you're like, okay, well, why is the background too dark or too light? It's like, well, then work on that next. And people expect to arrive at something detailed immediately, but also discount the quality of the steps, because once you learn how to get light with one light, or get good lighting with one light, then that's still a major tool in your arsenal. And you learn how to bounce the light into the shadows, or how to add another light, and a lot of people will get caught. I think there was it was on Negative Positives, and Kukovica was talking about, can people get gear acquisition syndrome for technique?
Yeah,
it's like, yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
You can go so deep into lighting technique, and that's what the part I think that really scares people when they are learning it, because they see all the fractions, all the potential math, and people's like, oh, the inverse square law and 6-point light, and just like it's, you got to have your ratios worked out. It's like I don't do most of that. I get the rough idea. I know I want my shadows to be a little bit darker than my highlights, but not completely darker. And then you just kind of learn rough ratios. Like if you have like 2 or 3 of the same light, and it's like, well, this one's all the way up, this one's halfway down. And there you go. There's a ratio. You don't have to know the ratio that is. You just know that my shadow is here, my highlight is here. And so when you're doing digital, you're shooting that and you can see it pretty much, and you don't think about it as much. But when you're using a light meter, you hold it up to the face, you point the thing at the strobe, and it reads F11. And you go to the shadow side and it reads F4 or F5.6, you know what it's going to look like after you have practiced it a few times. So you don't need to keep shooting the digital photo over and over again, because you know it's like you can pop the flash a few times in a field when you don't have the modeling light effectively because the sun's too bright. You can pop the flash and see like, okay, that's covering roughly the area I want to cover. So that should be fine. I don't think there's no weird shadows that should show up. I don't see any obvious shadows when I flash it a few times. And so I can just go out with having worked my way through some of the nuances of the technique. And now I can just go out with a film camera and a light meter and not be so worried. So like, you got to walk before you run, I guess.
Yeah.
And
so,
people forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're able to do that because you've kind of built up this library in your head of knowing, okay, if my light meter is telling me the shadow is F4 and my main light is F11, then you have kind of an idea of what that's going to look like. That's come through shooting lots of rolls and doing 104 photo shoots in 2022.
Stuff like that. It's like there's no substitute for doing the work sometimes. But you don't have to like necessarily do high art. You can do pictures of a dummy 100 times as long as you're paying attention to what this light is and what the other light is, and you're paying attention to the effects those changes have, and it should look just like that on a person or a building. It's just the light is light. Okay. So you realize, like I tell people, it's like, oh, why do they see the little dial on a light? It's like, oh, it's fractions. It's like, no. That's just like, you're going to shoot everything like full power, half power, quarter power. That's going to be almost everything. Or half power, quarter power, 16th power. It's going to work like that. You're basically going to have high, medium, low. Yeah. And that's really like, no one's going to go, it's like, oh, this one's 77 and that was 55, or you're a terrible photographer.
So maybe you can, we were talking about light meters and flash meters show or two ago. And from the way I understand it, if I've got a light meter in front of my face and I, point it at the camera and get a reading, so that's measuring the light that's falling on the meter, and that's telling the meter F11, and that's going to make a gray card gray, if I understand that right, which means that a light, I'm a white dude, so light skin is going to be a good exposure. If I did the same exposure on a black cat, then I'd be in trouble.
Yeah, it would in this case, reading off of the light meter, the black cat. Actually, it might work for the black cat, because it would make the black cat would be black. I just don't know if the black cat would be too black. Okay. That's the one that like I am not sure about how absorbent cat fur is versus like velvet or a sheet of something. That's where, like, if you were doing a spot meter, the spot meter would definitely make your skin gray. So if you're doing a spot meter, you might want to go up a notch. And then I tell people, it's like meters only read gray. Yeah. And it's just and so like there's a great experiment, and this is another thing that it's great to learn with a digital camera. Take a picture of a white wall, and then shoot it in the middle of the meter reading, and then shoot one stop over and one stop under. and you'll see that the difference, like the meter reading of a pure white wall will be gray. You go one over, it'll be more white. Go one under, it'll be darker gray, or it'll be gray. I mean, darker gray. You do that with a piece of black, pure black. It'll take the pure black. It'll be gray. It'll be light gray, or it'll be black when you go under. And then if you put half and half, the black and the gray, it'll be properly exposed.
Okay.
Because it's splitting a difference.
It's telling the meter, this is black, this is white, go in the middle.
Yeah. So you get essentially a black and white photo. And that little exercise was so handy in understanding how light meters work. And for when you go out and things like snow and everything is white, it's like, well, that's why you open up a little bit, because if you want that to be gray, then sure, shoot with what the reflective meter says. But if you want it to be white, then just open up a little bit, and kind of you'll get what you want. And the zones are scary too, but they're so useful to learn. But you don't have to know them in extreme detail. You just know the key elements and know that if I go a little bit longer on that exposure, or a little bit brighter or whatever, let in more light, it'll possibly make this black thing darker or this white thing lighter, depending on what you need from it. But a lot of it's just going out there and doing some work, playing with it, and learning some simple exercises, and understanding that you only have to learn a piece at a time. You don't have to learn it all at once, and there aren't going to be any quizzes on it. And even if you're in a class, you're not going to have the quiz on everything at the same time. Like, no, I don't think there's any class that's going to make you know every piece of lighting, except for maybe like a comprehensive exam or something at the very end. And by then you spend a whole semester working on it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think most people are, probably the people listening to this are doing it as a hobby and are just trying it out. So it's, if you like it, you're doing good. So
yeah, exactly. And just about anyone, if they have the cheapest, oldest digital camera available that has some manual settings, can do the black and white thing.
Yeah.
And they understand, oh, okay, that's how it works. And then they know what the meter says, and you can kind of go from there. But even with even with slide film, I should do a lot more spot metering, but I'll just kind of like, it's close enough. And it's okay if because I tell people, it's like pretty much on lighting, I like to take, like when I take a new film out, like the Lomo Chrome 92 stuff, I'm like, oh, it's nice in like this type of lighting. I'm like, let me just point it at the sun and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then
first roll, just to kind of see what it does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like what do I would joke when I'd get a new digital camera. It's like, okay, let's shoot it at 12,800 in total darkness. Let's see what happens. And just like Ferrania P30, famously contrasty. I made a post about this recently. It's like, oh, shoot evenly lit scenes. You mean like directly into the sun where the person's completely silhouetted?
It's pretty even. I mean, there's the sun everywhere.
Oh yeah. When you make it work though, you kind of understand how far can you push one way, how far can you push the other way, and you find out that film has a really interesting response and flexibility. It's just, you have to understand you might lose a few shots doing that, but when you hit, it's going to hit in a very unique way.
And each one's going to do different things in different circumstances, and then you can figure out what the look is that you're going for and what you like from it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so with the studio lighting thing, I did it, and it's like, okay, I fired all the flashes, the picture's evenly lit. All right, success. And then somebody's like, oh, the dark background's too bright. The pose is bad. This is very flat lighting. And I was like, okay. And so I didn't fix all the problems the next time I went out. I had to just keep shooting photos. But now, 10 years later, I can get a headshot from empty studio with bags of equipment. And within 30 minutes, I can be breaking down with everything in the bag and technically pretty decent headshots. completed.
Cool.
It goes that fast.
Nice. Just because you know where you're putting the stuff, what you're going for.
Yeah,
How much of it is knowing what your end goal is beforehand?
Sometimes, like if you want to do headshots, then you have kind of, let's say you have something of a goal. It's like, well, then you should probably learn some basic lighting styles and posing styles. And so that gives you something kind of, it's like, well, I want it to be this formal portrait with this type of posing. And you look up and it's like, that's basically Greek posing. Do a little quick reading on that. It's like slant the shoulders, turn the head this way or that way, depending on if it's a woman or a man or whatever, and tilt the head so the eye line isn't level. And then you just kind of try to get as close as that as you can every time. And sometimes you'll get a great picture, except for the eye line will be straight or the shoulders will be in the wrong direction. It's like, okay, next time, tilt the shoulders. And the good thing is most people won't care if you break like one small rule. And then you can just keep learning. So it's not the end of the world. That's the other thing. It's like, it's not the end of the world if you have like maybe some minor miss in there along the way, even for paid things. Now, if you want to go like, got a thing I have to close. Okay. But if you got like a big assignment, that's where you want to have done all the fiddling in a studio for like a big publication, because it just helps to know your stuff then. But you're probably not going to get the big assignment right away. And that's why you want to like just take friends and strangers every opportunity you have and be like, I'm going to take some pictures of you. Some of them will suck, but some of them won't. And you'll probably like more of them than I do. So here you go.
Yeah. That's a cool segue, because that's kind of one of the other things that I wanted to talk with you about, because you work with a lot of models or people who want to be photographed. Some more or less professional, I guess, and that's also a scary thing for people and for me. You know, how do you get the first person in front of your camera? And it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but will you sit here and let me experiment? So,
absolutely. And if you have the right rapport with like friends and stuff, that can be great. Like just still people that you know. But sometimes I found that some friends may not mean to, but they may be a little too casual, and you may not be able to make them do enough or make them behave enough. So I think a lot of times it is better to do strangers or semi-strangers, or just people. Like, it's so easy when you're a student because you can just find someone in class. Like, I'm a student, and if you're in a photo class, everyone's going to have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But even if you're not in a photo class, even if you just like, we share a space and I haven't stabbed you yet, we're off to a good start. So would you like to meet in this very public place where I can take some portfolio pictures of you, and hopefully you'll get a couple pictures you like, and I'll learn something. And I think it's easier to do work with like casual strangers like that. And then it also helps how you approach, like, you don't want to go up and say, you don't want to open with like, I'm not a serial killer, but also you want to give things to assure them that like, I'm not a serial killer without saying it. You want to be, it's like, just direct about what your purpose is. It's like, I want to take some portraits. I'm trying to learn lighting and build a portfolio. You have a great look. I think it'd be awesome if you see someone like walking around or in pictures and it's like, that is a really cool outfit. I would love to photograph it. It would look great. And I'll give you the pictures to use online or whatever, as long as you credit me. Most people are going to say, okay. And you just tell them, it's like, assure them, it's like, if you have mutual friends, like mutual friends are treasures, because then you can be like, I know so-and-so, and you can ask them about me. So they'll go and ask. And I've had people who are like, oh, this guy's a creep. But then they'll go and they'll look at the work or ask someone. And then the person thankfully will say, like, oh, yeah, he's cool. I like the work, or they're nice. You should do it. And it works out, and they get excited. And I've worked with people like that for several projects even after them being maybe skeptical initially. And the main thing is just be upfront. Don't be obviously too nervous. Like, you can be nervous, but just don't try to over or under explain things. And just say, I want to take some photos. You have a cool look. And then most importantly of all is obviously don't be a creep when you do get to. A lot of people do get the idea. It's like, oh, it's a dating thing. You must date all these models. Like, no, I don't. No. I don't do anything close to that. I'm like, this is professional, and I'll let them know it. And that's just, I guess that's just basic behavior. But I think things like that, and then also schedule your first sessions for very public places, even if they're less exciting. Like, there's a coffee shop at my at both my cities I shoot at most, and I'm like, everyone at this age goes to these coffee shops, and they're both in downtown areas. Lots of people are around, but there's some cool photos. It's like, you want to meet here? You're like, oh, that's in public. It's not the side of a road in a ditch. Okay, cool.
And they probably know it too then, so they know where it is,
and they've
and all
probably
that sort of
been
thing.
there.
Yeah.
So it's just like saying things like, without saying it, you're saying, I want to meet you in public around other people, so it's hard for me to kidnap you.
Yeah.
And so it's helpful to be able to say that, to say things, and it's like, I know so-and-so, ask them, and then it's cool if you don't have time, give them an out.
Yeah.
And it's like, if it's okay if you don't have time, but if you do, I think the pictures look great.
Yeah. No, that's cool advice. Yeah. So you do you also approach people like on the street if you see someone with a cool outfit and say like,
I don't do a whole lot of that, but also there aren't many people on the street in East Texas.
Okay.
But when it's easier, like in a coffee shop or when I was on campus and stuff, I would sometimes do that. And it usually just like lead off with something flattering, but not demeaning.
Yeah.
It's like, yo, your hair is like super cool. Could I ever take pictures of that? Just brief, very much a thing, like make it known that it's about the photos or whatever right off the bat. And it's not like, oh, you're hot. Or you look great. And it's like, you can say you look great, but you have to be a little careful sometimes, depending on who you are and who they are.
Yeah.
But it's like, but if you say, oh, your hair is so cool, or that outfit is awesome, it kind of lets them know, it's like, okay, they're not thinking sketchy things. They're just saying, that's a cool outfit.
Well, and I think the people who dress extravagantly or have a cool hairdo or something, that's not an accident. So they also appreciate if somebody notices, like, oh yeah, I spent 4 hours doing my hair yesterday, so thanks for noticing.
Yeah, I spent $100 to get this dye and cut. Yeah. So awesome. Yeah, I do want a picture of it.
Yeah.
And it's cool. Like, and then you follow it up with like, I have this public place, like not necessarily, let's go to this coffee shop. It's got some cool walls there. Connect with me on Instagram, and I have business cards too. That's real handy for that.
Yeah.
Hand them a business card, and then it lets them go home, chew on it a little bit. It's like, I would like the photo of my $100 dye job. And then they look me up on Instagram. It's like, oh, these are cool photos. I want one.
Yeah.
And then if they're really skeptical, they can go and ask people tagged in that. It's like, is this person okay? But most of the time they're going to be like, yeah, let's meet at the coffee shop and take photos. And then the rest is just up to being a decent person and getting a few photos and just giving them some photos, even if they're not the greatest in the world. Because I've heard of a lot of people who will do a photo shoot and a photographer doesn't like the photos and they never see the photos. It's like, well, they gave their time. Your one bad photo is not going to run your career.
Yeah.
Like, I've had so many people post so many bad photos I've taken. But that's why I go out and I take new photos and put more out there.
Yeah. So let's go back to the taking of the photos. So if you're at your coffee shop or you're there with your person and you decide, okay, I want to add some. Let's just say you don't want to add any artificial light, and you're out on the streets, and I don't know, maybe it's 4:00 in the afternoon or something. You've got lots of sunlight. What are you looking for as places or situations that would give you a good light?
In a coffee shop, I would look windows, tables by windows. that would definitely be my first thing. It's like, is there a good window somewhere with a table next to it? If that fails, then I start looking at, I definitely chase the light. And like, is this light, am I going to be able to just completely backlight someone? There's another reason I did a lot of backlighting, because I don't always get to choose the best light. There's not many, like, there's not a ton of amazing architecture here. There's not a ton of like amazing landscapes. East Texas is very knotty with a K. Like the woods are very tangled. It's very hilly, so the trees cover a lot of the horizon line. So you have a very undefined landscape, and a lot of the more classic nice buildings have been leveled for boxes. So you have to get a little more creative. So I find light, and it's like I find light in a direction that works, or I find the shadow side of something where the light is just kind of flat and soft, which has worked fine for someone like Richard Avedon, by the way. His American West photos were some of the most simply lit things ever, but they're amazing. But find light that will work with a person, and then if it's not an interesting location or a window or something like that, then I look for texture and shape, like geometry, color. Are there interesting lines? Is there like a window that has been like filled with concrete or plaster or something and painted? Can I create a frame for someone? Is there a line, either painted or physical, that I try to place them in a shape from there, I guess, or put them, and then I'll also think, what's a scenario here? Like, sometimes it'll be like, I want to make someone look awesome or something like that, like look like a badass or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'll get down low. It's going to be a power shot. The light's behind you, so it's going to be an epic power shot. And then you're walking up on the curb on the street, and you look down at me, and like, I'm the worst person in the world. And this isn't the actual scenario I want to depict, but I'm trying to give them direction. It's like, and you look at me, and it's like, oh, I'm scum. I'm leaving you. And that gives them the idea. It's like, that's the expression you want. And they look at me like almost like disgust or just total victory or something like that over you. And they kind of lift up the shoulders a bit, and then you get this real confident step. And, so there's different scenarios like that you can play out. And a lot of it's just like what works, and then listening to feedback too. And because sometimes people like photos that you don't like, and it helps to examine why, because you're thinking about, oh, I just really messed up the lighting on that one, but why did they like it? Is it because you took an angle they never thought would look good? You took something that accentuates something they really enjoy about themselves, or made them feel like, oh, I have this side of me that no one ever pays attention to, but this made me feel like that was there. So just you add a little bit at a time, and you don't start off finished. You just build from your crappy, like, oh, it's lit, but it's posed poorly and the lighting is really flat. And then you build from there to up, and then and you get good photos along the way too. So
yeah, that's cool. And I mean, the whole thing, when you're taking a picture of a person, all the pieces have to support each other. If you've got epic lighting, but you've got kind of a boring pose or a demure pose, then the epic lighting is kind of working against you in that way. Or
definitely
all the pieces have to kind of go together.
Oh yeah. And also, like, you want to find things that are cohesive with the idea. If you want someone to look like a badass, it's hard to do it if they're like in a 1950s rural, country dress or something like that.
Yeah.
or like an 1850s dress or something. So you gotta like, okay, how do I make this look like a certain attitude or like a certain look, or the classic lampshade or lamppost growing out of someone's head. It's like, oh, I missed that this time. Like I have a lamppost coming out of someone's head. You just kind of learn to look for it over time. And that's where having assistants would be so nice. I have a really hard time keeping assistants, but when I have them, they're like, oh, this thing is is sticking out. This tag is sticking out, and it really helps to have other eyes. But you get to where you are looking at the shot, and then you look through the viewfinder. And part of it too is learning to look through the viewfinder, because I tell people, it's like, I joke that when normal people see things, they see like floating eyes and then a bunch of blurs, because their recognition seems to miss a lot of things. But when you look through a viewfinder of a camera for the first time, you may not even be looking properly at the center of the viewfinder. And so you kind of have this vague idea of what's on the edges, and it helps to kind of like, at first it's a lot of hard work to look at the edges and think about what's there, or to think if your horizon or upright lines are straight. But it becomes second nature the more you do it. Like, you only have to try really hard to do that a couple of times before it just kind of sticks. And then when you pull the camera up, it's straight 95% of the time.
Building the muscle memory.
Yeah, exactly. The memory will come through a lot less repetition than you think. And occasionally it'll slip. But overall, like, I took a few photos. I don't remember if it was a swimming pool or something recently, and I was worried, like, oh no, did I get those uprights right? I didn't even pay attention to it. And I look, and everything was just perfect. I'm like, nice. All right.
Like, oh yeah, it sunk in.
Yeah.
When you are looking through the viewfinder, and I find when I'm watching a subject or a model in front of my camera, you get a feeling like there's going to be a really good look coming up here in a couple of seconds, or there's going to be, there's some kind of preemptive foresight before you actually pull the trigger, or take the picture.
Definitely.
I don't even know if you can learn that or work on that, or if it's just something that you develop. But what do you think about that?
I would agree that there's sometimes like you notice common reactions in people or common movements, or it's like usually when somebody does this or that, it'll look cool. And I've actually, one of the things I started doing is like, if I'm posing someone, it's just not working. Like, I can't get it right. It's like, okay, relax for a second. I'm going to look at something. And they always slump down or they do slouch. I'm like, there you go. Yeah. That's your pose. It's like that. Like, I try to stop for a moment, like stop with, like, I turn off the photo almost, and then they go into this fully relaxed position. And then also in that moment, you're telling them, this is what I want. This is perfect. Because a lot of times I find that the way people naturally relax is good, is exactly what you want. Or all you have to do is like, okay, that's perfect. Now turn your head this way or that way. And, or just tilt your head a little bit and open your mouth slightly so it looks relaxed. And so I modify poses a lot, is what I say. And it's the same thing for, like, usually somebody will do something, and I know in the past this has happened, or if I tell them to look, it's like, oh, that's cool if they look this way. I was like, now look this way, and I just know it's going to look right. And they're like, and then if it's ever one of those, like, twist your body one way, look the other way, I'm like, trust me, it feels weird, but it looks really cool.
Yeah.
And it's fun when you can show them on digital. It's like you can show them the back of the camera, and it's like, see, it does look cool. But I also find that gets real disruptive, which is another reason I really like film. You just have to, like, take the photo, and it's like, and it makes you better at assuring people too. It's like, that looks awesome.
Yeah.
And they have to take your word for it. And if you sound excited, then, they're going to be like, okay, I guess that looks really cool. Yeah. But if you have to stop and show them every time, you can't get into a flow. Yeah. And you lose confidence, or you just, and then sometimes they just don't see it when it's the size of a small stamp or something like that. And then they get real down on themselves. And then you just got somebody who's feeling uncomfortable, and it's just really difficult to work with. So film is really nice for just getting into the flow of things. But I find that it's best to just do a lot, like take pictures all you can. Don't overpressure it. Don't think you have to be a prize winner in the first roll or shoot or something. It's just like, just go and take photos and you'll probably get more than you like. And really, you only need 1 to 5 good photos out of a whole shoot, whether you shoot 5,000 digital or a roll of film.
There's a great meme of I think a middle format, 120 roll with 12 shots, one amazing, then the 36 is 36 shots, one amazing, then the digital card with like 10,000 shots and one is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. You wind up kind of the same place no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's great to have the 5,000 shots when you're learning, because sometimes when you're learning, it does take you a few more tries to get something amazing. But even after you've done it a million times, you're really, like in a year, you're going to maybe share one of those still.
Yeah. So let's, I'm interested in when you are adding your fill flash, you're on location, you in the woods or wherever you've decided to go, and you're going to go and do a flash image, and whether it's backlit or not, what is kind of your internal monologue when you're setting that up, and what are you thinking, or what are you looking for? How do you balance those exposures? Kind of walk me through that.
Yeah, I do try to find, let's say, like, imagine in the woods, because I've done this a few times where I go out and it's like a really bad time of day to shoot. I'm like, oh no, I'm not seeing anything. So I'm like, okay, like, is there cool light going through trees? Is there cool light falling somewhere? Is there an interesting big tree? And then if that all if that all fails, it's like, okay, is there open shade? It's just like when I go out to, like, I did the coffee shop scenario. It's like, okay, is there open shade? And then it's like, okay, if there's open shade and I have a flash, then I can point the flash in the general direction where the sun is, and then kind of like, okay, now there's sun that's falling on their face with this open shade background. And I'm like, okay, then I go into the scenario, and it's like, okay, what's the scenario here? What's a pose? Is this going for, depends on what I've planned to, like, sometimes there's more specific ideas. Like, you get an idea, it's like, oh, you're a fairy princess in the woods, or you're a hunter, or you're a feral child who's escaped society. So there's definitely factors on what you're trying to convey emotionally or literally. But if it's just in general too, you're just kind of trying, it's like, what looks interesting, what is intriguing, how can I do that? It's like low angles, high angles. And that's a lot of times where, like, sometimes I'll panic and, like, the light falling on them is not great. But what if I just get really low, put the sun right behind their head? What does it look like then? And it looks like I'm dying in the woods, and then this angel comes up to me, and it evokes that feeling. And that may not be the literal scenario I'm trying to portray, but I'm trying to capture the essence of that moment of rescue, or of encountering a strange being or a strange feeling, or just something big and, for lack of a better word, cinematic and vague. So it's like people will want to look, and it's like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and everybody will interpret the image differently too, based on their own filters. I'm gonna pull up one of your images, which kind of fits well to what you were just describing here. So this is for the people listening. This is one shot. It's a model wearing kind of a white shirt, and she's got kind of a black corsety thing, and some kind of brown pants, and it's in a woods, and the trees are kind of framing her, and the sun is clearly directly behind her head or behind her neck, and it's giving this lovely glow to her hair, and then you've got something lighting her from the front, because she's not a silhouette. So I'm guessing that's one of your strobes.
Yep. On this one, it is. So that's one of those situations where I'm like, I have somebody who's dressed like they're not in the woods for sure. Like, people in the woods don't really wear slacks and a corset. And so it's like, okay, so there's already something interesting going on here. This is a juxtaposition of something unusual. But also, this person is dressed in a way that suggests they're not a business person. There, and then so it's like I don't have to get too specific about what that is. She's like the ferry manager, or or like a or something like that. It's just it becomes more like like it's just an emotional reaction. It's like, oh, that's interesting. But so I had the flash, and I didn't want to just like it's like, oh, this is a flash and we're in the woods. I was like, okay, well, I got really low, and I was actually in a ditch, basically. So I was really low. And this is a wide angle lens. It's like a 40 millimeter Hasselblad lens, which is like, I think something like 28 millimeters or something equivalent.
Something like that, yeah.
And she's kind of taller and lankier, so you can get real close to models like that, and they look very long, which is why tall, lanky people are so popular to photograph, because you can just get really in close and it looks really interesting in photos. So we had tried variations on this pose, and that's the other thing. It's like not every shot is going to be a keeper. Sometimes you have to build up to the one that works. Sometimes it's your test shot. Sometimes it's your last shot, and sometimes it's why don't we try this instead? So like I would crouch down, like, okay, the sun's behind her. This is unusual. So the tree coverage in the sky looks a little more interesting when I point up more. It makes the trees kind of arch into the photo, which creates kind of geometry and shapes and stuff like that. And then I had her trying to remember exactly about it. It's like, okay, now kick your leg out a little bit, try to find a dynamic pose. And sometimes people will just fix their hair trying to find a pose. And she does some modeling, so she'll move around and stuff like that. But sometimes you have people who do zero modeling. I'm like, okay, kick out your leg. And it's like, oh, I need to fix my hair. And they'll put their arms up and they'll fix their hair. I'm like, there you go. Just keep that. Just And so that may have been what she did there. It's like, okay, I kind of like that. And it looks almost like, in my head, it's like, okay, this person is like an Indiana Jones type, or they're investigating something, and they're like in the epic woods scene in the movie, and they're kind of like adjusting their hair before, like, while thinking about something. And so, of course, without a flash, she's silhouetted with the sun there.
Yeah.
And she has very, very light hair. And I don't think she had any color in it at the time. I don't completely remember. But so her hair is very, very fair. So I'm like, oh, that's going to glow with the light behind it. So like normally, in hindsight, I might have turned light a little more where the shadows are a little stronger. But because I don't like to necessarily look like, oh, I've got a strobe in the woods. But also, if you can do this multiple ways where it looks like it's just, oh, that's just the natural reflected light from the area that makes her face look more visible. Or you can, this was also like something that if I had shot it at like 6 o'clock at night, the sun would have been a bit lower, but the sky would have been, if I shot at 1/500th of a second, the sky would have been a lot darker.
Yeah.
And this was I probably shot this at 1/500th of a second. And so that tells you how bright it was out there.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And so you're using the Hasselblad to, with the leaf shutter to get as much of the ambient down as you can.
Oh, yeah. And that's one of the first things. Like, I have been a detail fiend. Like, I have liked larger negatives and more detail and resolution and stuff, which I think maxed out when I shot some digital medium format. I'm like, okay, I got my fill of that. But I do like it, and that's how I discovered that. But then I also discovered, like, oh, when you shoot things like the Hasselblad with a leaf shutter, you don't max out at 1/90th or 1/125th of a second or whatever.
Yeah.
You can really get that dramatic, underexposed background look that I grew up loving so much. And so, yeah.
So this is kind of that epic magazine shot you were talking about of, backlighting and then the strobe filling it in.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
How would you meter that?
Metered, at this point, I mean, normally I could just use my phone meter and it's like, okay, it's bright, and 1/500th of a second at f8 or f11 would get at least not a completely blown out background because it was so bright. But then I didn't do any kind of traditional metering on her because I knew she would be just straight up silhouetted at this point because it was so bright. So I just kind of like put the flash 45 degrees slightly up angle because that's the starting point for just about any portrait lighting. That's just like if you want it to look more dramatic, you push it a little more to a side. You want it to look more plain or whatever, you push it a little more centered in most cases. So I'm like, I knew I wanted 45 degrees up and down, pointed down a little bit. And I moved it probably just a little bit more to make it not so obviously a flash. And I probably... doing it again, I would have moved it a bit more, like I said, to get a stronger shadow side to look maybe like the sun had somehow wrapped around a little bit to get it to make it look maybe more natural, but maybe not. But to get a little bit a different ratio, I guess you could say, between the lights and shadows. I just then had the light meter, and here's one thing with shooting strobe and metering it in really bright light is that the sunlight can influence your light meter. It's bright enough that it can cause an error in your reading. You might read f8, but that f8 might be all sunlight. So I will either pull the dome into the, like it's a retractable dome, so I'll either do that or I'll cup my hand, or even depending on where the light is, not on this case, but you see your shadow cast on the person, so you just hold your meter in the shadow and you know it's not getting sunlight.
And
that's so you have to make sure what you're reading is truly the meter. And so I wanted probably f8. I usually shoot a lot at f8. I'll occasionally go f11, but I usually won't go any more like f16 or whatever unless I specifically want sun stars. Because I don't want to necessarily do everything wide open. I try to avoid that, especially now because it just got so oppressive where like everything is like, if you look at SLRs right now, one of my problems with digital is like the lens is the size of a barrel and it's an f1.2 and it costs $3,000. And all it's good for is shooting at f1.2.
Yeah, they don't even go down to f16 anymore.
So I'm like, so I try to stay out of the extremes. And another thing is too, my eyes aren't amazing. So when I was shooting a Hasselblad with the digital back, I would misfocus so much. But if I put it on an f8, I could usually hit it pretty well. So it just makes you think more about your background and your composition, and you don't rely so much on the background is blurry, doesn't it look cool? But also, f8 is usually pretty good for f8 and 1/500th of a second for a bad time of day, or for a later time of day. It gives you a nice darker background, and then you just raise your flash until it hits f8. It meters at f8, and then since they're silhouetted in this case of extreme backlighting, you can pop the flash multiple times and see like, okay, I could see it's like the flash is getting down to her thighs at least, like lighting wise, and I don't think it's creating any overly awkward shadows on her glasses. And then you can see the nose shadow in this case too, and it's not quite a perfect loop, which is another reason I should have had it over just a little bit more. You see how the nose is almost front lighting, but also that's unassisted life. She was doing multiple poses, and then this one, I'm like, that's close enough to loop. And so like, if this were the shot I went out, like if I went and it's like, I want to go out and recreate this shot, hey Amber, can you go with me to that trail and do this again? I would move that, and I would know now. It's like, okay, when you're like this, I'm going to move it just a little more over to loop that light. And when people realize like the loop means when that little shadow wraps around her nostril, and it makes this like little L shape.
Yeah, you've got kind
And
of the shadow coming a bit more off to the side than of what it is now. You're
yeah,
kind of in between loop and butterfly or paramount lighting here, where
yeah,
the
yeah,
shadow's falling
exactly.
directly under the nose, and
Yeah,
you want to have it kind of coming a bit more this way to get a loop.
yeah, definitely. And I don't want it to go so far that it's like a disconnected Rembrandt.
Yeah, yeah.
And oddly enough, that was with her. I did this other shoot with her recently, where I was real happy with how I posed her because I did the full Rembrandt triangle thing. I'm like, I remembered, turn your head just a little. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Hold that. And it looks good.
Cool.
And so it's just one of those, like this shoot, I kind of missed a little bit. But then the next shoot, I remembered, oh, why don't I just move that light just a little bit more? But in this case, too, I don't think it necessarily ruins the photo that I just slightly missed the loop on the nose.
I'm pretty sure you're the only person who's analyzing that loop, and which is
Exactly.
great because that's what you're working on and that's what you're trying to improve on, and anybody watching or listening is kind of coming along on that journey. But you always think when you're looking at other people's photographs, I wasn't looking at the loop. I was like, oh, cool backlight. Look at her hair glowing. Look at the pose.
Oh, yeah, she
cool
looks real
woods.
epic. And
Yeah,
what's going on here? This
yeah.
is really cool. And then that's when you realize, oh, I slightly messed up, but no one even notices or cares.
Yeah, yeah. So that's awesome.
Yeah, close is good enough sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you get something perfect, then I don't know. That's great, and it's lovely to have a great shot. But I enjoy the process of learning and trying different things.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if I get close to what I set out to get, then I'm happy. So
Oh, yeah. And there's this concept, and I'm pretty sure there's like a scientific study for it, but I've always called it jitter. I did it in graphic design and everything. I would always notice that if things were a little too perfect, they looked boring. But if you just had some subtle differences, some slight misalignments, something's a little off, it looks more natural. And that's what people are noticing with digital noise versus grain. Grain, everyone's like, grain is more organic, grain is more natural. It's because grain doesn't fall into a perfect grid like pixels do, and it introduces this kind of softness to it in a way that makes it look more natural because it's not so rigid and perfect.
So you on this shoot, and I think this is also one of your YouTube videos, if I remember right. So
Yeah.
people can look over your shoulder and watch you doing this.
Yeah.
In this shoot, you also, I'm going to pull up one here, and this is the same shoot, I'm guessing, but
yeah.
you did a black and white image, and
Yeah.
maybe just talk a little bit about what your thought process is. When do you reach for the color? When do you reach for the black and white? And what do you do differently then?
And sometimes I'll just do it to like force myself to see different, because I can get so in love with color that I forget that black and white looks really cool. But also in this case, I'm like, okay, this grass is dry. This was sometime more wintry. I forget exactly when, but it was colder. Everything was kind of dead, and there wasn't much vegetation in a tree. She wasn't really wearing any particular color either. So I'm like, okay, well, why don't I try to like see what I can get black and white? And I don't remember. I had to have used flash on this a little bit. But there were some times where I'm like, okay, the sun was starting to get a little lower. It's starting to get a little better to work with as opposed to earlier in the shoot. But I'm like, okay, well, I will shoot backlit without flash a lot too, and just blow out the background more. So it's kind of weird. I'll go like either severely underexpose the background or completely blow it out. And I think both of them have a lot of, like, there's this angelic type quality to a silhouette, a would-be silhouetted backlit overexposed background. And sometimes you want somebody to look like angelic or celestial or whatever. And that kind of gives you a mood or feeling for how you're seeing that person. And then her pants in this case were darker. than the grass, which would show up lighter. And so everything's kind of like you get to play with the shapes more. Like I said, she's kind of taller and more lanky. So I had that wide angle lens a lot closer than it looks. And it lets you fill the frame with shapes more and think like in triangles for her legs and triangle for her arm. And so you kind of build compositions out of the poses. And this is all stuff that you don't see when you're learning it, but then you try it a couple times and like, oh, in this pose, why don't you bend your leg? It'll create a triangle. And then you kind of get better and better at doing that and building compositions. And that's also where it's handy to, I mean, number one, look at other people's work, but also look at other art. There's like some, I want to say the artist is Richard Diebenkorn. It's a painter who will do very broad shapes. And it's very handy for learning composing with like very, very broad shapes. But it's kind of like it'll be like a building or a parking lot or a landscape or something like that, a living room. But it'll be built in this very basic way. And you learn how to build interesting compositions. So when you're posing someone, you can start seeing them in a series of triangles. So not only are you getting an interesting pose with a person, but you're also building the composition in a very structured way without even thinking about it sometimes. But it just kind of helps bring together, like especially another thing I like about the square frame of the House of Blood is it really works with a lot of filling the frame. Like you can fill the frame in ways that it's harder to do on narrower frames.
Yeah, you're always. I noticed that too. You're always kind of saying like, okay, you can make your arms wider, or you can reach out this way a bit more, and rather than like, oh, can you bring that arm in a little bit? It's out of the frame, or and you've got this nice in this image. It's as you were saying, backlit, and you've got your lens almost sitting on her foot, I guess, and you've got this leg kind of leading you up, and her whole body is kind of at a diagonal going across the frame. So you've got this nice leading line, and then you've got her other knee kind of making a little triangle there, and her arm is going across it, and her corset thing is making kind of an interesting shape, and the lights and the darks, it almost looks like an infrared photo almost. Yeah, it's kind of getting
I'm trying to remember if this was. I want to say this was Cat Lab's film, but I can't remember if I shot. I don't think this was ortho, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But it does have that feel, and that's part of why I shot black and white there, because I knew all that stuff would go so light. I may have had a filter on. That's what it was. I think I was shooting filtered.
Okay. We'll go back and watch the video.
yeah, you'll have to watch that for sure. But that's why it looks like that. And I knew all that kind of brownish, reddish stuff in the background would go really bright, and that would make her pants go darker. And so I'd have this like almost ortho quality to it. And it just feels like kind of it gives a dreamy quality maybe to this this setting. So you can see that there's a lot at play that I definitely didn't think about when I was shooting. I just kind of learn it, and it stays in there. And that's kind of how it works. Like it's not always a conscious thing, but you've learned it, and it just becomes part of the process.
That's very cool. That's something that I tell a lot of my, I teach tango on the side. So I tell a lot of my students, when they start, then we talk a lot about walking and how to walk and how to move your feet and that sort of thing. And, then after a couple of months, I say, remember your first class, we were talking about walking and that was hard, and now you're walking and you're not thinking about it. So, you just got to keep building up those. You can only focus on, your brain can only be concentrated on so many things at a time. And so you've got to train yourself to kind of have some things working in the background or on autopilot that that frees up your cognitive ability to focus on new things or the creative things that you want to be, working on today.
Yeah, definitely. And you don't like. I'll have anchor points. I'll think of like the no shadow is a good anchor point for me because I know a lot is going to fall in line if I get that right. And then that'll give me a chance while I'm looking. And another thing I tell people is like, it's not going as fast as quickly or as long, or it's not going as long as you think it is. When you're framing that up, it's not taking 10 minutes. It's probably taking 2. And so people get this like rush mindset. So they don't take an extra second while looking through the viewfinder to like, is the tree in the wrong place? and if you give yourself an extra second, sometimes looking around, it's like, oh, the corner of this frame is weird. I just noticed my finger is on the lens. Like I'll have a strap over the lens sometimes. And because like, it's like, okay, and I'll hold that for a second. And that's another nice thing about film. You can say, this is a little slower. It's going to take a little longer, but it's going to be great. And even though I did this the other day too, I shot 3 rolls of film with someone, and it was like 1,000 degrees outside, so it was exhausting. But we shot 3 rolls of film, so I was doing her senior photos for college. He was graduating from a university, and so we were on campus shooting some photos. I'm like, okay, there's 3 rolls, there's 12 shots per roll. 36 photos doesn't sound like a lot, but or 32, yeah, 36, yeah, 36. Yeah. But I was like, it doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, when I've noticed, especially since I've been shooting so much more film only, I almost only do 1 shot per pose now. Like I'll get a pose and I'll move to the next one. And I remember digital, especially, you just do 25, 30 of the exact same pose. And then you agonize on the computer after. I'm like, which one is better? Which one's going to end my career and which is going to make it take off?
Is it this one or this one? Here?
Yeah, exactly. Here? It's like sometimes a little hair will blow in the wind. It's the only difference. Yeah. It's like one of these is better. One of these is going to make me. The other one's going to end it all. It's like film. It's like, I got the shot. It looks good. It works.
Or it doesn't.
Yeah, or it doesn't, and then you move on to the next one. Yeah. And I tell people, it's like, we take 36, you're only going to care about 3.
Yeah.
Like she needed 2 for her invitations. I got 35 out of 36 exposures right. I think I missed focus or just I forgot the flash on one, so it was really underexposed.
Okay.
Because I forgot to plug in the flash.
Yeah.
So at this point, I took 36 shots, 35 turned out, and she only needed 2.
Cool.
So, and I've got like 2 or 3 on there that I was like, oh, these would look really cool if I just put them on my Instagram or put them in a portfolio or something. So that's it. That's all I needed.
Cool.
And it saved me hours going through 2,000 digital files.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So are you scanning and developing those yourself then?
I am. Yeah, I develop. This is kind of where the darkroom probably started seeding itself in my mind. When I was in grad school about 8 or 9 years ago now, I borrowed a Jobo from my community college where I worked and took a bunch of photo classes. And so like the teacher let me borrow the Jobo because students weren't really using it anymore. They were shooting some film, but they weren't that intense anymore.
Okay.
So I borrowed it and I was doing my graduate work on it. I'm like, oh, these are great. I can do 5 rolls of film at once. This is awesome, especially with color and stuff. Yeah. And so at some point, it wound up after the photo program got killed. The Jobo wound up being gifted to me.
Nice.
So I was at home with this Jobo. Like I kind of like it had a missing cog on it, and I kind of replaced it and kind of got it cleaned up and running full speed again. And I was developing a ton of film, and then the pandemic hit, and people were like, do you develop film? And I started developing tons of film for people. And which reminds me, I have a lot of stuff to scan when I get home. But it just grew from there, like where I've always liked doing it myself. And when I started photography, I didn't really like developing film a lot. But then something like it was 18-year-old me versus not 18-year-old me. but I really love developing film now.
Yeah, I find
it's got a lot of other things. Yeah,
I find it very relaxing. It's kind of a meditation,
exactly.
You got to be there, you got to be paying attention, but it's not super stressful. So you're kind of in this kind of zen, relaxed state where it's like I'm just watching my timer. I'm not thinking about much else, but it's not
especially when you get to especially when you get to build it into your living situation. Like everything's exactly where I want it.
Oh, nice.
I don't have to fight people for sync space. Everything's where I need it. My timer's in the same place every time. I do the same process every time, and it's very relaxing and very rewarding. And I have it set up in a way where within an hour, almost everything is dry.
Nice.
I joke that it's almost 1 hour photo.
Nice.
I can go shoot photos, get home, and almost within an hour have them dry, developed. And within another hour, they're dried. Like if I'm really crazy, I get a heat gun and dry the negatives, but I haven't done that in a while because it is so sensitive that you have to be so careful not to push too hard.
Yeah.
But I'll force dry it to the point where it doesn't grain it up or anything. But I recognize the drying process of film now. So like within 2 hours, I can have it on the scan. I can scan it, which I do the camera scanning stuff.
Yeah.
And I had the process down. Negative Lab Pro, like I need to learn their copy settings to the whole roll thing. They changed it on this beta, and I have not learned it.
Okay.
But I've got a pretty fast workflow with the whole thing. And it's nice because get the benefits of Photoshop and Lightroom, but without the hours of culling 45 of the same photo.
Yeah. I've got my tip that I'm always trying to tell people when they're setting up a camera scanning thing is I've got a macro rail bolted to the wall. And so that's my copy stand. And
nice.
So whenever, it's just sitting there, and whenever I need to do it, I just put my camera up, put my scanning bed underneath it, take my pictures, put it away. And I did a roll of medium format the other day. It was like 10 minutes from setting everything up, everything scanned, everything inverted. And
that's awesome.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
Oh yeah, that's the thing I love about camera scanning too. There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah.
There's so many ways you can spend $2,000 on a setup, or you can spend $20 and possibly get a setup.
Yeah.
It's just so versatile, and a lot of it's just like what works best for me. You can get a very good setup. Like I got lucky and got one of Ethan Moses's Mongoose scanners for my 35 millimeter.
Nice.
I suck at using the auto settings on that.
Okay.
But I figured out how to use a setting slightly wrong, and I can scan a roll of 35 millimeter film in like 5 or 6 minutes.
Awesome.
Convert it in like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Like 30 minutes, I'll be looking at positives and picking them out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we've been talking for quite a while. I think we should wrap it up a bit. But just a couple of kind of quick questions to, I don't know, just the quick fire round, as some people call it, or whatever. So if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody who's starting with Flash, what would be your top tip for getting started?
I think probably the top tip would probably be don't be afraid of it. Just screw it up a bunch, because like my early Flash photos look pretty bad. It's like, just get it out of your system. Like learn how it works. You will do some. It's not going to be nearly as hard as you think it is. It's not math. Really, I'm bad at math. There's very little math. As long as you can remember full, medium, low, you're probably going to know enough. There's nothing wrong with auto settings, but also manual is just really easy, and you'll find that a lot of times your settings are almost always the same. Like almost every picture I shoot is at f8, and the flash setting is like roughly halfway most of the time. And my shutter speed is almost always, like on the Hasselblad, is almost always 1/250th or 1/500th.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like 3 settings I use. Like, it's like, that's it. It just gets like, there's a thing called the funnel, the creative funnel, where you narrow down what you can do. Like you pick a specialization. So you have all the world, and then you pick one thing and it gets real narrow. But then you narrow down, like, what do I like to do? And then the world of possibilities opens up. So I've like opened up the world of possibilities for my 2 shutter speeds, 2 f-stops, and 1 or 2 flash settings.
Nice.
And now I don't have to like do a lot of complex metering. I just kind of learned how shadows work, learned lighting, color, hard and soft lighting, because I went out there and screwed up a bunch of photos, and my career didn't get ruined by it.
Nice.
So I just go out and screw up a bunch and read and watch videos.
Nice. Color or black and white, if you had to choose?
If I had to choose, I know it's so good to say black and white. I want to say black and white so much, but I just really love color. But I shoot color like black and white.
Okay.
I tell people.
Okay.
Like, you think in value and everything in black and white, but I'm like, you can think in value and shape and color too, and you just have the added variable of the colors themselves and the intensity of those colors. And so I kind of think of it all the same way, but if I had to choose, I'd probably have to do color, just because I'm just like that. But I think people should strongly, if they don't shoot much black and white, I think they should really dive into it, because it can look extremely dramatic, especially at times like sunset.
That's interesting, because you usually think like, oh, sunset, nice warm colors, reach for the color film. And maybe actually like, doing the contrary would be more interesting.
Oh, yeah. I have a friend who went to Shiprock State Park, like beautiful mountain. I forget exactly. I'm bad at this, but but it's like a beautiful mountain, New Mexico landscape. And it was like sunset, and there was like a hard shadow falling across, and the light was so warm. So everyone would be like, ooh, these desert colors and a sunset color. She shot black and white, and it looks so beautiful.
Oh, nice.
The contrast is so nice. It's just like all that texture, all that contrast and value changes. It's just beautiful.
Cool. Let's go ahead and get your contact stuff here, because as I said, I think I heard you on a podcast first, and then saw your YouTube channel, and then found your website, and then found your Patreon, and so you've got a whole bunch of stuff going here. So I hope I've got all this right.
You do. Okay,
go ahead and for the people listening, where do you want to direct people to go?
Okay, so the easiest thing is, if you can't remember anything else, Jamie M Photo, that's JAMIEM, like Mastodon, I guess, photo.com. That will have links to all my personal socials. There's Jamie Maldonado on YouTube, just my name. We'll probably pull it up. Instagram, if that's easier to remember, is Jamie M Photo also. Pretty much my Jamie M Photo will lead you to everything under my personal stuff. And then there's also pinywoodsdarkroom.org or Piney Woods Darkroom on Instagram, and I think they're both on Threads. I'm trying to remember all the socials now, but Jamie M Photo and Piney Woods Darkroom will get you what I do almost anywhere.
And I'm sure
Jamie
they're all
Maldonado for YouTube.
They're linked to each other too. So if you find one, you find them all, I guess.
Exactly. I try to make it where, like, if you can remember one of them, you'll be able to find them.
Yeah. So what is the next step with your with Piney Woods? Where's that going? What's the next step?
The next step is finally finding a place where I can open a physical location. There's a bunch of different aspects at play. Like, I'm trying to get into a certain arts funding district in Longview, Texas, so that kind of limits my geographical reach, but also it's very advantageous too, and then affording it. And so on that note, I am always open to take donations of any size.
Yeah.
Even now, I'm a 501c3 nonprofit, so legit, there's laws that say things I have to do with it and everything. So I'm approved. I have the letters, and I'm legally bound to show you if you ask.
And that means donations are tax deductible. If I
yes, they are. Yes,
I've been dealing with German tax law for 10 years. So
oh wow! Yeah,
how to practice with the American stuff.
Oh yeah, I am at the point where I'm like, I am doing very narrow things so that I don't mess up and get a rude awakening from accounting at some point soon.
Yep.
So I'm like being but everything I'm done, I'm taking every note, like keeping up with every receipt and purchase. But every donation helps a lot, and it goes 100%. Like I haven't even really paid myself yet. So, and this is going to be my main job. So that's going to be a thing I have to do. But yeah, everything goes into trying to open this darkroom, and hopefully it'll become like a destination, and on top of becoming a hub for this area for people who want film and who want to learn all aspects of analog photography.
Cool. Are you also looking for equipment or that sort of thing?
Yes, I do. I do take that. There are certain things like travel is hit and miss for me to pick it up. Like there are a couple things in play where like if I drive to somewhere I might be able to get it, but overall if it can be mailed, yes. If I can pick it up or you can drop it off to me, absolutely. So and certain things I would drive across the country for. So I do.
If you got something good, then get in touch, and you might find a
useful
home for it.
Oh yeah, and if it has actual monetary value still, and you do want to do something with taxes, I'll talk to an accountant and figure that out.
Yeah, I think you can get like a donation receipt also for a good that you donated. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there's it'll work like any other nonprofit. I might just have to learn really fast to not screw something up. But I would happily take it. I've taken several donations. I have pictures of my storage unit, which is beginning to overflow. So I'm excited to actually get a location so people can play with all this stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. I this last weekend actually there was an analog workshop here in my hometown, and I happened to stumble across it, and it was it was 3 days, meet, develop, and print in the darkroom, and it was funded by the local government arts commission or something like that. So it was a free workshop for the participants, and it was really cool. It was, I think, 8 or 9 participants and 2 or 3 guys leading it, and it was really fun to see, talk to the people who had maybe never done it, younger people who had never shot film, some hipsters who were just getting into film, some older guys, some older ladies also who had, used to shoot film and wanted to get back into it. So just seeing that enthusiasm from all those people was fantastic. So I'm sure that's something that you'll get to experience soon too.
Oh yeah, that is definitely one of the main things. I'm like, I want to give people the access to all this stuff. But I really love the idea because I wanted to be a teacher. They just killed them all in my college programs. But I want to have classes and one-on-ones and give people the opportunity to meet other photo students and like learn from other people and have that kind of situation where I had and other people have had in education or whatever, or communities and build the community part of community darkroom.
Cool. Well, it's been lovely chatting with you. I'm sure we could go on talking for another couple of hours. So maybe we'll have to adjourn and come back another time and
absolutely. I'd love to come back.
Yeah. So thanks so much for making this possible and sharing your experience with us. And
thank you, and thanks for being my first Sunny 16 podcast, by the way.
Oh, is that
in the network? Yeah, I think it's the first one.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm happy to bring you to this side of the pond, I guess.
Oh yeah,
get you exciting. Out of the negative positives pool and bring you over to the Sunny 16 world. I'm sure I could make some jokes here, but I love those guys. Yeah. Hey, everybody. All right, well, that's us for this time around. I've got another couple of guests in the works, so keep your eyes on this space, as they say. And we'll talk to y'all again soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.